Melody is the heart and soul of the song. It's the part you remember, and it's the part that the crowd sings. But most people structure their melody entirely wrong. Most people think you need musical talent to write a good song. While a good ear for these kinds of things is useful, we can teach the way that musically gifted people think. Let's start with the fundamental. Every sound has a root pitch defined by the lowest, loudest frequency. When this wave vibrates twice as fast as the first harmonic, it sounds like an auditory octave. This is why octaves sound like the same note when you play them together. This series continues to a fifth, octave, fifth, then a third, and then more harmonics that end up creating the 12 notes you have on a piano. Because our ears are attuned to hearing these divisions, we'll structure our chords the same way. Root, octave, fifth, third, but space them out over a bunch of different instruments and sub-bass. It's easiest to just steal chords from a song you like and layer them out this way. I'm using Avicii levels for this. It's good to have a sound palette. So for this I'm using a couple of different guitars and then some synth plucks, and then I'm tying it all together with a sub bass right low underneath everything. The chords set the scene. I'm using a minor chord progression because that makes the scene feel sad, but I can use a melody to give it hope. It's like if it's a rainy day and somebody comes over to you with an umbrella. The rain is going to represent the chords, and then the melody is going to be that umbrella. The next trick is dissonance. If you play two notes next to each other, the harmonic stacking is all off and our ears just don't like it. The pentatonic scales don't have any of this dissonance. The minor major scales, which are the same by the way, have this dissonance twice. So we will only use notes from the pentatonic unless the chords have a note that isn't pentatonic. It's easier for your mind to understand the same note layered above it in an octave, so a sweeter melody usually aligns with one note from the chords. Then we just play and jump through the scale to lead listeners to these notes. Some people have a more talented ear for this, but anyone can build great melodies with enough practice and the right system. Now the next trick is arguably the most important, and that's repetition. Yeah, it's like the same three notes just repeated over and over again, but it gets stuck in your head, and then days later you still remember it. Your mind is lazy, and this repetition and duplication makes the music easier to interpret. We have lined up the main notes of our melody with a note from the chords, and now we repeat the sections that sounded the most catchy to our ears. For our repetition, we have lined up the main notes of our melody with notes from the chords, and now we're just going to add in some repetition at the most catchiest points that we have decided. For example, here. Because attention spans are low, thanks TikTok, we can make the melody more interesting with some triplet grace notes and layering another octave below it for the second half. Here I've got a flute lead I've made with serum and a pluck layered on top. For the second part of the melody, we layer this pluck in an octave lower. These grace notes were thrown in randomly where it just sounded right. The real magic is to play around with these concepts enough that you develop the ability to tell what's catchy and what isn't. The best way to do that is just to practice, either in your DAW or if you play an instrument, such as me playing piano, just sit down, play through a bunch of melodies, and see what sticks in your head. The more you practice this, you'll learn other little tips and tricks too, but these are the main ones that I've been using recently. Another little thing that I'm doing here is I'm using these reversed reverb tails to help draw the listener into the next note in the melody. A melody is strongest when it's predictable enough to be easily interpreted, but unpredictable enough to still be interesting. If I take a note with reverb and reverse it, it helps the listener understand where the melody is moving when I lead the two together. Now we just throw in some hard-hitting drums and cymbals, and we're left with this. That's 80% of my secrets. If you want the other 20%, consider subscribing.